Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 23.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. I'm excited today to bring you a great interview with Cynthia Muchnick. She is the author of a great new book called Writing Successful College Applications is More Than Just the Essay. So in this interview, I've talked with Cynthia, and we learn all kinds of great information about the whole application process. And by the way, it's a great book, so if you're looking to learn more, I'd recommend picking it up. But we cover a lot on all the different aspects, not just the actual essay, but all the other components and all the other ideas that I think parents and students need to understand as part of the application process. And then I follow up with a question about student loans. So the question is, how long do you have to repay a student loan, and what are the repayment terms of a student loan? And we get into that in a little bit of detail as well in the question and answer section. All right, without delaying things any further, let's go ahead and jump into it. Oh, and before we go there, I just want to remind you that we do take notes for you. They're the show notes, and they're available at our website, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. In this case, /23 for episode 23. So it's tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/23. Of course, /22 and 21 will get you to notes of all the other podcasts. So if you ever hear anything that you need to get back to, you can look up the show notes at our website. All right, now let's jump into the interview with Cynthia. All right, today I'm sitting down with Cindy Muchnick. She is the author of a new book called Writing Successful College Applications. It's More Than Just the Essay. So welcome, Cindy.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. We're going to learn a lot today because I've been reading your book, and it's a lot of great nuggets in there. So if we can get a tenth of what you've written into this podcast, it would be great.
That sounds good. And then the other 90% people can go read it themselves.
Absolutely. Go buy the book. It's well worth it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, before we jump into the book in great detail, let's tell us a little bit about your history and what you do and how you came to do it.
Sure. Well, I have been working in the education field for about the last 20 years. I started as a college student at Stanford, where I worked as a tour guide, and then pursued a career in college admissions. I had volunteered at the admissions office as an undergraduate and thought the process was pretty interesting. So I spent a couple of years on the other side of the table reading college applications for the University of Chicago and the Illinois Institute of Technology, both in Chicago. And then over time, that actually evolved into a private college counseling business, which I've run for about the last 15 years, helping students navigate actually middle school, high school, and ultimately college and the college application process. So I've always been interested in the particular stage of life, the teenage experience, and really like to celebrate and cheerlead those kids, encouraging them to, do the best they can do in those hard 4 years of high school, so that they get a phenomenal reward after that, which is going to college anywhere. And to me, that's the carrot at the end. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. The essay book just evolved out of years and years of working with students and preaching what I preach, but also learning from them through the process, and basically making my college application business accessible to everyone in the form of a book, so that you don't have to fly to California and sit down in my office. You can just read everything that I would be saying and working with my kids to teach them and learning from them as well.
All right. Well, great. I guess the first question I have is, obviously you wrote the book about it's more than just the essay. Tell us a little bit about what that title really means. What else is it besides the essay?
Well, that's a good question. It means a couple things. First of all, the essay and the personal statement is what families tend to put the most emphasis on, or the most fear in the process of writing a college essay. But there's sort of two answers to that question. More than just the essay means that there are multiple factors, obviously, that colleges consider when evaluating students. Their transcript being the most important piece of a college application, which is just the grades that they've learned, their big report card. Extracurricular activities and, community involvement, leadership, any jobs they may have had. Obviously, teacher recommendations, if you're applying to universities that use those, come into play. Test scores, those unbearable experiences of, SATs and ACTs, as well as, other testing that might occur. And the writing that students do for their application, which it's more than just the essay because there's a personal statement, but many, many schools have other writing supplements. And so the book focuses on the personal statement and the other pieces of writing that students oftentimes have to complete as part of their college application, which would be pieces such as an activity paragraph, an academic paragraph, why this school paragraph, sometimes a full supplemental essay, a whole second essay that they might need to write, specialized for a particular program or school they might be interested in. And so those pieces, also short answers, or even the open-ended question, is there anything else you might want to tell us about you? Or are there any academic or other concerns that you would like to share that we haven't learned about in your application? So there's lots of shorter pieces that I really encourage students and families not to throw away, but to take as seriously as they would a personal statement, because that writing is being asked for a reason. And it's an opportunity for a student to share more information about themselves with an anonymous reader.
Okay, so I guess the nugget there is not only are you doing the quote unquote actual essays, which they're obviously you're supposed to be writing and writing well and doing the right things, but they don't read just the essays, they read the whole application. So you need to treat the whole application with the same effort, I guess, and intention that you might with just the essays in isolation.
Correct. That's well summed up.
Okay. So, and we're recording this currently in the fall, so it is essay time for a lot of families right now. And by the time this goes live, it will probably be crunch time at a lot of households. So if I'm a parent of that teenager that's working on their applications, how do I help and how do I not hinder? What's your advice to a typical parent?
Well, for parents, this is always walking a fine line between being helpful and supportive without being a slave and taskmaster. Students at this time, it's a real push and pull. They want your help and support and love, but they also don't want it. And I think as a parent, some of it comes down to knowing your child. Obviously, if you have a child that's a procrastinator and that needs help staying on task, you can't really just bark all the orders coming from you, or you'll have no relationship left before they leave the home for college. That's where an influential teacher or a school counselor or a private counselor or some other adult or older sibling that they trust can help guide and encourage and cheerlead and support the process. But really, I sort of equate applying to college, although this may come out a little bit strange, but it's really just a rite of passage, just as any other teen would have a rite of passage of getting their driver's license. You have to go through classes, take a test, take a behind the wheel test, do stuff you don't necessarily enjoy or like, but in the end, everybody gets their license, and somehow we have drivers all over the road. It may take a few tries, but they eventually get it. And the same kind of goes for college. Applying is a process. It takes time. Some students are more ready and actively, sort of throwing themselves into the process. Others are very hesitant and scared of the process, feel overwhelmed by it. So I think as a parent, one of the best things you can do is to help gauge and guide where your child kind of is in that process. Obviously, helping be aware of what those deadlines are and helping carve out quiet time to allow them to have time to do the work and to think about what they want to write about, and to offer support if they want it, which they don't always want.
Right. And obviously I work with a lot of parents on the financial side. And I guess what I see is parents, you're not alone if your teenager doesn't seem to take your opinion seriously. That's another part of the rite of passage.
Absolutely. In fact, I have a quote on my website that says adolescence is a period of rapid changes. Between the ages of 13 and 17, a parent can age as much as 20 years. And I like to, advise parents that, we know it's not an easy time, but, these kids will have a deadline that they will ultimately need to hit. And the schools are going to require, them to complete paperwork and to get their teacher recommendations in order and to be actively engaged in the process. So they can spend Christmas and New Year's break working on it, or they can really spend other time, namely either the summer before senior year. So for those who haven't started, there's kids that have been working on this all summer. That's always a good time for planning for your next children, to use that summer break, but also to help find these chunks of time, because it does take time. And one thing I really like about the process and advise students and their parents is that when students are doing the writing, if they hit a roadblock or they just need a break from it, there's always something else that needs to be completed. For instance, the biographical information portion. Then from there, they can pop back to working on some writing. Then from there, they can pop back into putting together their student resume, which is filling in blanks about activities and extracurricular things they've been doing outside of school and in the summers and on the weekends. So there's a chance in the process to sort of break it up into pieces, manageable pieces. And a lot of times when you write, you need to write and then you need to put it down and give yourself some space from it and look at it with fresh eyes a couple days or even a week later and see something new in it or bring some new inspiration to it. And I think when a student's ready and they feel like it's at an acceptable place to look at, they should find a trusted adult to take a look at it. Not 20 adults, not every adult person they know, just one, maybe two, to just get some feedback and, have someone else maybe catch some grammatical errors and ask a few questions and, be a tail end part of the process.
Right. And that person could be mom and dad, or could be someone at school or some other adult that's available, whether, aunt or uncle or family friend.
Somebody that the student trusts and feels comfortable with. But the problem, Brad, is a lot of kids share this essay with a lot of people, and then they get all this feedback from many different perspectives, and soon the essay becomes less their voice and more the input of all these others. And the only person who can write a personal statement is the person who's writing it. So that is what makes it personal and real and honest. So a good gauge is when a student has a draft, I encourage them to print it out, not read it on a computer monitor, but print it out on paper, use a few trees and bring it with them into the bathroom or into their bedroom and stand in front of a mirror and read it out loud to themselves. They'll feel like kind of a dork, but they will actually see if they can hear themselves, hear their voice speaking in this personal statement. And if it sounds like them and they've expressed a thought or an experience or a glimpse of who they are, their personality, or, if they're humorous, they can include humor. If they're serious, it can be serious. There's not a lot of strict rules about these personal statements and how they need to be done. And that's what writing successful college applications shows students, is a huge breadth of possibilities of what they could choose to write about and the style and tone that they could write about, really virtually any topic that, means something to them, or any conversation they've had, or some family tradition or talent that they have, some glimpse, some anecdote that offers a glimpse into the essence of who they are. And the questions are pretty open-ended. So I'm less about being a strict follower of a prompt and more about what is it that you want to take a few minutes to share with your reader. Actually, your reader will spend a few minutes with it. You'll spend several hours preparing it.
Right, exactly.
So what is it that, what story, what piece of your life, what moment And oftentimes, Brad, the most simple, straightforward, mundane, basic story can be the most revealing about and the most honest about, a 17-year-old. So I have a whole area in the book, and each chapter begins with do's and don'ts. And, one of the don'ts would be, don't write what you think they want to hear, because how would you know what that is? Write, honestly, a glimpse of who you are.
Right.
So anyway, the book really, I think, just is meant to, de-stress and demystify this process and really make it relatable and accessible and manageable to high school students when life is already filled with lots of other pressures.
Right. That leads me to, I guess, in talking about the book, I noticed that you have 50 sample essays in there. So I'm guessing, since you put a lot of them in your book, you believe that at least sample essays are a good place perhaps to start and kind of get an idea of how other people have done it, but then obviously you want to write your own.
I would start with first that one of my don'ts is don't plagiarize. So don't even think about that or going there, whether it's a sentence or a string of words or, or an essay in and of itself. That would be a big mistake.
Exactly. If somebody else has written it, you must put it in quotes.
Yeah, colleges can see right through all of that. They have all sorts of software that does, crazy checks for all of that. And anything that wouldn't sound remotely like you will come across that way. That being said, I think reading real essays from a wide variety of students of wide ability and wide experience really is a great way. Good writers look to other good writers, or writers who want to be good writers look to others to model and to emulate. And I think that by seeing what other students have written about, or the tone they've used, or the style they've used, it helps calm everybody down. And it's just an interesting way to get into the head of all these other strangers that you're learning about. And I think each essay in this book has, I guess I'll put it in quotes, has worked, because every one of these students has gone to college somewhere. Don't list all the schools that they're going to, but I list that, every one of these students used this essay as their college application essay and are successfully enrolled, or in some cases graduated already from college. So it's manageable, it's doable. It should not be, the sole focus of life and, a process of, killing yourself to do something. That it's just something they should really put effort into, as they would a very important school project. So, don't make light of it. But the essays, yes, there's probably about 70 or 80 in that section. And then there's samples of what I mentioned before, of activity paragraphs, academic paragraphs, and suggestions, do's and don'ts, and then real examples, so that students can see what other kids have done. One other thing, Brad, I should point out is that this process is particularly tricky for teens, because the writing that they have learned in school is typically a 5-paragraph essay or an argumentative essay that they need to write to analyze a text, or to talk about a period in history, or to put together in kind of a research paper, or to make an argument. And that couldn't be more different than the writing being asked in a college application. In fact, many of the rules of the structure that they learn in the classroom, I write this in the book, can just go out the window, because the rules don't really apply here. What applies here is students should write in the first person, they should write about themselves, and they should bring your reader into that moment, into that story, and show, don't tell, write using your 5 senses. It can include dialogue, it can include humor, it can include stream of consciousness, it can include quotes. It really can be kind of a fun and freeing experience if, we weren't so busy freaking everyone out about it.
Right. So in the do's and don'ts section, I happened across a don't that just kind of resonated with me. It was essentially, as far as essay topics, and you specifically in that, where you started with a mention of, well, don't write about, that sports incident, that, the winning touchdown kind of thing, that I think gets at least a thought of a lot of people. I'm going to write about, my sport and how being part of a team and And I think that gets cliche for a lot of people that have to read these essays.
Yeah. Many years ago, Brad, I heard the Dean of Admissions at the University of California, Berkeley speak, and she had read personally thousands and thousands and thousands of college essays. And I was a young college counselor at the front end of my career. And she said, I have yet to read a sports essay that really tells me something different about that student. And the reason being that, while sports are a huge, important activity for kids and for not just physical fitness, but for team building and understanding winning and losing and leadership and all those other wonderful things, the themes tend to be very generic. And so I always challenge students, if they want to write about a sport, to find a different angle. So there are examples in the book of a student who wrote about being a referee, getting his referee license and reffing a lacrosse game as opposed to being a player on the field, and how his perception of the sport shifted once his role shifted. And I do have another student who writes about the active repetition of basketball and throwing shots in a quiet gym all alone, and what the metaphor of what that repetition and that experience meant to him and how it applied to kind of a more global vision of his life. And when students tend to write in a way that goes beyond just, it's not all about winning and losing, or I remember when I got injured and had to sit on the bench, or just kind of generic themes, those would be, I guess, examples of the way sports might be able to work as an essay. But I really caution students to try to come up with anything. In fact, I have a list of 17 questions to get your juices flowing in the book. And it's right at the very beginning of the book, to kind of help kids realize that there's so much more than an extracurricular activity that they could write about.
Can you give us a couple examples?
Sure. I mean, students have written about a meaningful conversation that they had with, a classmate, or a game of cards that they played with a grandparent. Or students, have written about teachers that have inspired them, but not the kinds of teachers necessarily that stand in front of the classroom, but oftentimes a camper in their summer camp, or a child that they have tutored as a volunteer job. Students have written, humorously about things like, that are a part of their life. One student wrote about his to-do list, his checklist of what keeps him on task, and how that checklist has sort of, become this symbol in his life of how he kind of gets things accomplished. Ways that students can come up with ideas to allow an author to kind of climb inside their brain, or inside their body, or inside their shoes, just for a short while. I also have students that have really enjoyed this, what I call a bulletin board essay, and the book offers samples of those where they can't quite hone in on just one snippet of their life, and instead want to take a theme and kind of carry it through a few aspects of their life. And the reason I call it a bulletin board is it's almost as if you looked at a bulletin board in someone's room or on someone's computer desktop with, a ticket stub, a photograph, a postcard, and something else. And this essay kind of references each of these things, these mementos, and how each one reflects a different part of that person. So there's some examples of how students have done what I call these bulletin board essays as well. So I mean, they can go very deep and become very creative. They can be very straightforward. They can be very emotional and painful about, for a student moving to, leaving their school and moving somewhere new, and how that move might have impacted them. Some medical or health issues sometimes students have chosen to write about, and how those have, influenced them. But I find in many of the deans that I interviewed, and we can talk about that later, but, we often find that sometimes just the most basic, straightforward life moment, a trip you've taken to the grocery store, or a bus ride you were on, or a family tradition of playing Scrabble, or a family tradition you might have of, an ugly sweater contest at Christmas, whatever is something that brings the reader into your world and your life. That to me is much more revealing than the theme of the time your team made it to the playoffs for the first time in history, or something like that.
Right. So another chapter, I guess, kind of shifting gears, because I think this is relevant, especially to parents and students, but you you have a chapter about recycling your writing. So give us a couple do's and don'ts there. I mean, obviously, if you can write fewer things by reusing essays, I think it can save some time, but is that allowed or is it encouraged or
Sure.
what?
Yeah, so I mean, I am not a believer in, doing more than you have to do in this process. We're not trying to win the award for most writing in a college application. In fact, to me, yes, anything that can be streamlined or reused is, I would highly encourage that. Just I would encourage exceptional proofreading so that you don't include accidentally the name of the wrong college when you're sending it to one school, or something that wouldn't be pertain to one college but pertains to another, et cetera. But the example that I I think one of the examples of recycling that I think works really well is in a question about why do you want to go to our school? And colleges sometimes word that differently. It might be, why do you want to come to our school? Or it might be, what do you think you want to study? And how would you, pursue that at our school? Or what made you interested in our school? Anything that has a school asks of you to then sort of reflect them back would be a good place to do that. And I'll explain how and why. And there's a whole chapter on it, as you mentioned. But oftentimes when I worked in admissions and I would read the why do you want to come to University of Chicago question, and I would read that answer over 3,000 times, I read that answer. I thought to myself, what is this really telling me about the student? Not that much. It's just showing me that they've done their homework on my school and that they know my school and that they've demonstrated an interest in my school. So there is a way to be very generic when you answer that question, which is not what I would advise, which would be, your school is has a great reputation with every major I could possibly want, and it's located near a wonderful city, and I've always dreamed of going there, and I really think I'll be able to pursue my interest in English in your English department. I mean, this is all, you could name any school that a student might be talking about, but if a student gets specific about a particular program or a particular aspect of that school or a tradition held on that campus, then that the student has spent a little bit of time perusing the website or visiting the campus or talking to their counselor specifically about that school. They've done some research. So what that demonstrates to a college is, us and you took the time to get to know us as best you were able. Doesn't mean you have to get on a plane to do it. All the information is there on the internet, even virtual tours for that matter. So in the Why This School, I had a student who actually created almost like a Mad Lib answer where he created spaces within a piece of text to input specifics about each different school. Does that make sense, Brad? So it would say, when I go to, blank, as a student at blank, and he would fill in the name of the school, I hope to participate in blank, blank, and blank clubs. And he actually got the names of the real clubs, the actual names. He didn't assume that they had Habitat for Humanity, because if they don't have a Habitat for Humanity club and you say you want to do that at that school, that's just a red flag right there. But if they had a special club that was a community service oriented club and you got the actual name, you could input that. And then he put, when I attend your school, I also plan to take a class from Professor Blank, and he found the names of a professor that interested him. And I'd also like to take this course, and he found a course in their catalog that interested him, and followed it up with, I plan to cheer on the blanks, which were the, whatever mascot that school had, and some, particular sporting event, and then topped it off with, I want to participate in whatever. And he goes on to describe a campus tradition, whether at Northwestern, they paint a rock over and over again, or at Stanford, they, they do fountain hopping and the kids jump from fountain to fountain on hot days, or at, Duke, they build a big bench outside their dorms and they have a big bonfire. So whatever might be a school's tradition that the student has found or learned about, they could include that there as well. Now, a question like that breeds really well to kind of recycling. You would make it specific to each school, but you would recycle sort of the body of what you've written. That would maybe be one example. The other way to look at it would be if you had to say, what is it that you want to study at a particular school? And you obviously could use that same answer for multiple schools, just changing out the name of their program or department, or again, the name of a professor or the name of a class, something like that. It's kind of like doing a little mini research project. But, you can also do that with main essays to some degree, not quite as easily, because now on the Common Application, which about 500 colleges use, you really send one main essay that gets, distributed off to each school. There's really not an opportunity to kind of personalize your personal statement to each school. And I really discourage including the name of a college in your personal statement, because then you're, just talk about college as generic if you happen to mention college anywhere in there.
Right.
So anyway, those would be some thoughts on recycling.
Well, great. Well, we're coming up on 30 minutes here, so it's time to wrap things up.
Okay.
But before I let you go, I always ask 3 quick tips. So my goal here is to get 3 quick tips. Our target is parents of busy high school kids that are trying to figure out college. It can be about stuff that we've just talked about, or it could be completely unrelated. But what are 3 things that we can do to make our lives a little easier as we do the college process?
Well, even though this is coming at crunch time, it would be to really manage time wisely and try to find those, open chunks of time to really help your teen have a quiet space and a dedicated time to kind of work on this. You almost have to treat it like an extra class. So that might be, one tip, which would be just find viable chunks of time to devote to the process. And if it needs to be over school vacations, then so be it. But preferably, you can still enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner without running back and forth to the computer to work on your essay.
Right.
Another piece of advice, although it's shameless, would be I really think writing successful college applications is full of hundreds of pieces of useful advice. It could almost be read with, a highlighter. And in particular, there are 10 deans of admission that offer their advice at the end of the book, interviews with all these different deans from a variety of schools. So I think reading the book would be my second piece of advice to kind of help navigate the process and demystify the process. And then the final piece of advice I think would probably be to breathe, because this is, can get to be an intense process. It can get to be unfortunately a combative process sometimes between parents and teens. And sometimes we need to just take a step back from all of it and realize this is just another one of those rites of passage that everyone will get through. And if we breathe and, kind of keep it all in perspective, there are, over 3,000 colleges in the United States, Brad, and every one of them is full service, meaning that, they pretty much offer every major that you could possibly imagine for a variety of, from a variety of price points and a variety of geographic locations. And I think that, students, if they want to pursue a college education, it is certainly there for them to pursue. So if you breathe and keep it in perspective, you will get through this process, and ultimately kids and parents, I think, will get to enjoy this wonderful, stage in kids' lives, which I think is really kind of the 4 best years of life, or probably those years in college, although we might not appreciate them quite as much when we're there. But I think looking back, many of us could agree.
I would agree with that, absolutely. All right, so where can we find the book, first of all?
Thanks, Brad. The book is available on barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, Target, Walmart.com, all those places. So there's also a website, www.cynthiamuchnick, CynthiaMuchnick.com, and a Facebook page dedicated to the book. So if you go over there, you'll get all the kind of current news. I do tend to write articles here and there. In fact, I just published 2 pieces, one called A Crash Course on College Admissions, and another one, 10 Ideas to Get Your Juices Flowing. So those are posted on my website and also posted on Facebook. And on the Petersons site. Petersons is the publisher, so they also sell the book and have the articles posted. So good kind of to help kids jumpstart, and help parents could print out that article and pop it on their kid's desk as a little reminder. So yeah, so it's available everywhere. I also have a Twitter called @collegeapps, APS, only 1 P, because the 2 P's were already taken. Mm-hmm. So @collegeapps is another place to find information on the book and on me.
All right, well, great. I appreciate all your help and great information. I guess one other note, I am reading the Kindle version of the book, so it is available both electronically and in paper form. So
thank you, Brad. Yes, Kindle and also, Brad, I should probably mention I travel all over the country and speak in schools and for parent groups, for student groups, and if any of your listeners out there want to want to bring me over, I will gladly speak. I have a whole list of talks on the websites, and and really enjoy connecting with the teens and also with their parents.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much for the great information. And again, I recommend the book, and we will probably have you on again sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Brad. Nice talking with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a question? Brad is accepting questions from his listeners now. Record a question at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com and get it answered on one of the future episodes.
Today's question comes from Steve. Steve emailed a question about student loans. And his question is, what are the repayment options or terms for the loans that we borrow for college? Can we start repaying right away, or can we wait till after the student graduates? So let's get into that a little bit. So first of all, we have to talk about the major categories of loans. So the main categories would be the federal loans, which are federal student loans that are backed by the federal government. These loans are available through the college financial aid departments. There's also private student loans, where you get a student loan that comes from a bank or credit union or other financial institution. And the last way that you borrow for college is some sort of outside borrowing, like a home equity line of credit, or a loan against your investments, or a loan against your 401k, and those types of loans. Now, each of those groups kind of has different rules, and let's get into each one of those. Starting with the federal loans, because the federal loans have a lot of different options, and I guess basically for federal loans, most federal loans now are deferred until the student graduates. So the direct loan, the Perkins loan, and the PLUS loan, the three main federal loans, all three of those you can defer payments until the student graduates. In addition to that, the government offers a number of different repayment plans, and they also offer the ability to consolidate your loans. So as you're going into college, for a lot of families, you're going to pick up a $4,000 loan the first year, and $6,000 the second year, and $3,000 the year after that. And you have a bunch of different loans, a bunch of different interest rates, all with, potentially slightly different terms and conditions. Generally, the federal government now allows students to consolidate all their loans that are perhaps scattered around a little bit into one big student loan. Parents can do a similar thing in that they can consolidate all the loans that they've taken out for their children into one big consolidated loan. Now, when you consolidate, it makes your life a little easier in that now you're not sending checks multiple directions. But what cannot happen is you cannot take a loan in the federal system that's in the parent's name, for instance, and somehow move it to a student. So once it's a parent loan, it's always a parent loan. Once it's a student loan, it's always a student loan, and they cannot be combined. After consolidation, many students now have many different repayment options on the federal system. Right now, they offer what's called standard repayment, graduated repayment, extended repayment, income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn repayment, income contingent repayment, income-sensitive repayment. So they have a number of different programs available. Some are available for some loans and not others. Some are available for the consolidation loans, some not. So you need to understand what options are available. But realistically, I think most families are going to deal with that when you get there. If you've got a high school student and you're trying to figure out how you're going to repay your loans 5, 6, 7 years from now, I think there's a good chance that the rules will be different by then. So I don't know that you need to spend a lot of time planning. Just be aware that right now, at least, there's a lot of different choices available. You can consolidate your loans. You can set up an income-based repayment plan. You can set up pay-as-you-earn. You can extend the loans. The standard loan has a 10-year repayment time frame, but you can extend that to 15, 20, and even 25 years on some of these different programs, which will reduce your overall payment, but it'll also increase the amount of interest you pay, because you'll be paying interest for many more years. So that's what's going on with the federal loans. Again, they're all deferred until the student graduates. If you take private student loans from a bank or credit union, then it's whatever the terms and conditions you choose. And these loans have a more wide variety. Some of them offer you can pay just interest while the student's in school. Some of them offer no payments at all while the student's in school. And some of them expect full payment to start right after the loan is issued. So you're going to make your repayments starting immediately. And again, the interest rates and these terms and conditions vary by lender. So you just need to read what their offer is and understand and compare not just the interest rate, but also these terms and conditions. And of course, if you take loans in the form of home equity line or other loans that are not necessarily associated with college, most of those loans you're going to have to start repaying immediately. So if you refinance your mortgage, take a home equity line, those types of things, those repayments start immediately because they're not going to defer. They don't understand that you're using it for college necessarily, and they're going to expect their repayment to start immediately. There's a lot of great information. I will put a couple links in the show notes, but the Federal Student Aid website offers all the information about these various repayment plans and how consolidation works. And I will provide a link in the show notes for that. But hopefully this helps you understand a little bit about loans. That's all we have for today. I appreciate you listening. Again, if you are getting some value, I would appreciate it if you could go to iTunes and give us a rating and review. And also subscribe there if you can. That helps us get found when other people are searching for college-related podcasts. And I appreciate you listening in. That's all for this week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.